it feels like every time you look, the financial headlines are just bouncing all over the place. Crypto 1 minute, recession the next. It's hard to get a real grip on what actually builds lasting wealth in America, right?
Totally. You see these flashy stories, instant riches, but that's usually not the reality.
Exactly. So what are those fundamental strategies? The ones that, really endure? That's what we're digging into today. Our mission is to really dissect the core principles, drawing straight from some, frankly, landmark research. Think of this as the deep, no-nonsense guide.
Yeah, forget the hype, the fleeting trends. We're here to pull out the timeless stuff, the practical knowledge that consistently makes the difference between financial independence and just, well, staying on the treadmill.
And our main source today, our foundation, is The Next Millionaire Next Door: Enduring Strategies for Building Wealth. It's by Thomas J. Stanley and Sarah Stanley Fallaw. Now, this isn't just some random finance book. It's a major follow-up building on decades of really groundbreaking work started by the senior Dr. Stanley with the original classic, The Millionaire Next Door.
Right, that book was huge.
Huge. And what's really valuable here is the data. It was gathered between 2012 and 2016. So that gives us this amazing look at how these wealth-building strategies have held up over time and, how they compare to what they found way back when.
That long-term view is absolutely key. We're not just looking at a moment in time. This research is anchored in years, decades even, of meticulously looking at the actual habits, the behaviors, the mindsets of affluent Americans. It's an incredibly rich data set.
It really is. And we're going to unpack it piece by piece. Our goal isn't just to skim the surface. We want you, our listener, to get a really comprehensive understanding. We'll pull out those key insights, those aha moments, and the stuff you can actually use on your own financial journey.
And look, we know deep dive can sound a bit daunting. Maybe like information overload is coming. But we've structured this. It'll be clear, hopefully engaging, and will guide you through it. You'll feel informed, not buried in data.
Okay, let's jump in. Where do we start with unpacking the core of this research?
Well, let's begin right where the book does, with a distinction that's absolutely fundamental to everything else.
Yeah.
It underpins so much of their findings. It's the difference between income and wealth.
Income versus wealth, okay. Sounds simple on the surface, but I guess the implications run deep.
Exactly. Income is, well, it's the money coming in now, right?
Yeah.
Your paycheck, business profits, whatever you're earning today.
Got it.
Wealth, on the other hand, that's the pile you build up over time, your assets, what you accumulate for the future, for security. It's less about the flow of money right now and much more about what you keep, what you grow.
Okay, so flow versus accumulation.
Precisely. And they use a really stark example. Imagine someone earning $1 million a year. That's high income, no question.
Definitely, top percentile.
But
Yeah.
what if that same person spends $1.2 million a year? Maybe it's lifestyle creep, luxury stuff, whatever.
Okay, I see where this is going.
Their net wealth isn't growing. It's actually shrinking by $200,000 every single year. They're on a negative wealth path despite that huge income.
Wow. So the takeaway isn't just the definition. It's that wealth building is about the gap, isn't it? The difference between earning and spending.
That's the crux of it. It's the rate of accumulation determined by that gap. Doesn't matter as much what the absolute income number is, it's about how much you're keeping.
That really flips the script on how a lot of people view financial success, doesn't it? A big salary doesn't automatically mean you're building wealth.
Not at all. And that leads us straight into the next critical idea. Net worth.
Right. Net worth. That's the real measure, isn't it?
It's essentially your personal balance sheet. You add up everything you own your assets, so house, investments, savings, retirement funds, the whole lot.
Okay.
Then you subtract everything you owe your liabilities. Mortgage, car loans, credit cards, student debt, anything outstanding.
Assets minus liability.
Yep. That final number, your net worth, that's the most accurate snapshot of where you stand financially. It's your progress report on building wealth.
And the book really hammers home the point about looking at median net worth, not the average, when we're trying to understand the typical American household. Why is that distinction so crucial?
Well, think about it. The average, the mean, can get massively skewed, right? You have a few billionaires in the mix, and suddenly the average wealth looks really high.
Yeah, it pulls the whole number up.
Exactly. It gives a misleading picture of what's actually typical for most people. The median, though, that's the middle point. Half the households have more, half have less. It's much more representative of the central tendency.
Like if Bill Gates walks into a bar, the average income skyrockets, but the median income barely budges.
Perfect analogy. Same idea with wealth. The median filters out those extreme outliers and shows us the reality for the person in the middle.
And the numbers they found for 2016 using the median,
Hmm.
they're pretty eye-opening, aren't they?
They really are. Back in 2016, the estimated median net worth for U.S. households was about $97,300.
97,000, okay.
Compare that to the average net worth, which was way up at $692,100. Big difference.
Huge difference. That 97K feels much closer to what most people might, realistically expect.
And here's the really sobering part they point out. That median figure, $97,300, was just slightly less than the average cost for a single year in a nursing home back then.
Wow. Wait, say that again?
Less than half of U.S. households, if they sold absolutely everything they owned, could afford 1 year in a nursing home.
That's genuinely shocking.
Yeah.
It just highlights this incredible financial fragility that exists for so many people, completely hidden if you only look at the average wealth numbers.
Absolutely. It shows how far many households are from real financial security, despite what, broad statistics might suggest.
Okay, so to really get inside how these millionaires next door actually do build wealth, we need to understand the research itself. How did they gather this data? How did they analyze it?
Right, the methodology. So the cool data for this new book, The Next Millionaire Next Door, it mainly comes from a big survey the authors ran between 2015 and 2016.
Okay.
They specifically targeted affluent Americans. This was crucial because it allowed them to compare the habits and behaviors of today's affluent folks with the millionaires Dr. Stanley studied decades earlier.
So they could see what's changed and what's stayed the same. That longitudinal view is powerful.
Incredibly valuable. They also pulled in data from the Affluent Market Institute and another firm called Data Points to sort of round out the picture.
And when they say affluent Americans, who exactly fits that bill in this study? What was the threshold?
Generally, when the book talks about millionaires, they mean households with a net worth of $1 million or more. Pretty straightforward.
Oh, okay.
But, and this is key to their analysis, they didn't just look at the absolute number. They brought back a really important concept from the original book, expected net worth.
Right. I remember this. The formula based on age and income. Can you walk us through that again?
Sure. It's a pretty simple calculation, actually. You take your age, multiply it by your realized pre-tax annual household income.
Okay. Age times income.
And then you divide the whole thing by 10.
Got it. Age X, income 10. And that gives you what exactly?
It gives you a benchmark, a kind of financial yardstick. It suggests roughly where your net worth should be based on how old you are and how much you're earning.
So it's not just about having $1 million. It's about how your wealth stacks up compared to what's expected for someone like you in your age and income group.
Precisely. And this is where they introduced two really important categories for their analysis. They divided their affluent survey group into prodigious accumulators of wealth. They call them PAWs.
PAWs, okay, easy to remember.
And under accumulators of wealth, or UAW.
UAWs, got it. Prodigious versus under accumulators.
Yeah.
So how did they decide who was a PAW and who was a UAW?
They looked at the difference between someone's actual real net worth and their calculated expected net worth based on that formula. Then they ranked everyone in their affluent sample based on that difference and split them into 4 groups, quartiles. Those in the bottom quartile, meaning their actual net worth, was way lower than expected for their age and income. They were the UAWs, the underaccumulators.
Makes sense. They're affluent, but not accumulating as efficiently as expected.
Exactly. And conversely, those in the top quartile, whose net worth was significantly higher than expected, they were the PAWs, the prodigious accumulators.
Okay. So even among millionaires, there's a big difference in how effectively people are turning income into actual wealth. That's where the real lessons are, isn't it, in comparing those two groups?
That's the core of their comparative analysis. It lets them pinpoint the behaviors, the attitudes, the choices that differentiate the super effective wealth builders from those who maybe aren't maximizing their potential, even if they have a high income or decent net worth already.
It's a much more nuanced way to look at it than just drawing a line at $1 million.
Absolutely. This division, this PAWA framework, it's specific to their survey sample, of course, based on the stats of the people they surveyed. But the underlying principle comparing actual to expected wealth, that's a powerful lens for understanding what really drives economic success for anyone.
Yeah, okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
We've got the definition of wealth, how it's measured, the PAWA concept. Now, the book kicks off with this really strong statement about freedom in America, particularly financial freedom.
Yes, chapter 1 is called Still the Land of the Free. And it really taps into a core belief Dr. Stanley held throughout his career. He often talked about his own grandmother, an immigrant who came here with almost nothing, and the incredible opportunities America offered for people willing to, work hard and make smart choices.
And they tie this directly to the Declaration of Independence, don't they?
They do. They quote Jefferson, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And they argue that financially, this translates into the freedom to choose the kind of life you want, how you pursue wealth, how you build it, how you maintain it. That power to make financial decisions, good or bad, largely rests with the individual here.
It's a powerful ideal, connecting those fundamental rights to our financial destiny. But the book immediately contrasts this ideal with the financial reality for a lot of Americans.
It does, starkly. Despite these freedoms, despite mountains of financial information being available, the reality is, well, a lot of people aren't financially secure. The book cites some pretty worrying stats.
Like what?
Like only about 28% of Americans feel extremely or very prepared for retirement. That's low.
Wow, yeah.
And maybe even more telling, 54%, over half, say they'd struggle to cover an unexpected $400 emergency expense.
$400. That's not a huge amount, relatively speaking. That really shows the lack of cushion for so many families.
It's a stark reminder. Financial freedom is still an aspiration, not a guarantee, for a huge chunk of the population.
And the book suggests that the main hurdle for many isn't always just not earning enough income, right? It's often about managing expenses, even for people with decent salaries.
That's a really critical insight they emphasize. Yes, you need some income to build wealth, obviously, but the real struggle for many, even higher earners, is the expense side of the equation.
Controlling spending.
Controlling spending, understanding where the money's going, making conscious choices about allocation. It often comes back to that fundamental gap between earning and spending, not just the sheer amount earned.
Yeah, okay. And one potential path the book explores for boosting that income side and building wealth is entrepreneurship, right? Owning your own business.
Absolutely. Their research consistently finds that people with certain traits, creativity, courage to take calculated risks, determination, a good sense of the market, those who start businesses often end up with significantly higher net worth than people who just work for others.
That makes intuitive sense. More control, potential for scaling. Plus, the book mentions that a successful business throws off revenue you can then reinvest elsewhere.
Right, exactly. Business profits can become this powerful engine for buying other assets, accelerating that wealth accumulation. But, and this is an important but, the book also throws some cold water on the romantic idea that just being self-employed automatically makes you rich.
Yeah. There are some statistics that kind of temper that enthusiasm.
Definitely. They point out that in 2015, there were over 25 million self-employed sole proprietors in the U.S. That's a lot of people.
Huge number.
But the average annual net income for that entire group, just $13,154.
$13,000. That's surprisingly low for an average.
It really underscores that while entrepreneurship can be a path to wealth, it's not a guaranteed ticket. It's often tough, and for many, the average financial return is actually quite modest.
So it really takes more than just hanging out a shingle. You need those underlying qualities, the creativity, the determination, the market sense, to really make it work financially.
Precisely. Those are the differentiators.
Okay, shifting gears a bit. The book also talks a lot about the impact of the values we learn at home, how we're raised around money.
Yes, this is fascinating. They use a case study, a guy named Ken. His dad was a highly successful surgeon, earned a lot of money.
Okay, so probably a wealthy household?
Income-wise, yes. But Ken was raised in a remarkably frugal environment. Academic achievement was prized, sure, but any kind of flashy spending, strongly discouraged. Conspicuous consumption was a definite no-no.
Interesting. So high income, but low outward display of wealth. And that stuck with Ken.
Absolutely. And the story about his father's estate is incredible. When the father passed away, Ken and his family were genuinely shocked to find out he'd accumulated over $10 million.
$10 million. They had no idea.
None. Ken said his dad was just frugal, period. Famously, he'd only buy a new Buick maybe every 8 years, and only when the old one was practically falling apart.
Wow. That's some serious delayed gratification.
And Ken clearly absorbed those lessons. He says, like father, like son, I am frugal. My wife is even more frugal.
Huh. So it continued.
Yep. He even shares his own car buying strategy. He buys used from smaller leasing companies, cars repossessed from people who couldn't make payments. He got a $35,000 sticker price car for $22,000 doing that.
Smart. Resourceful. It's not about being cheap. It's about being strategic with money.
Exactly. prioritizing long-term security over short-term flash, understanding the power of money saved and invested.
It's a great example of how those early lessons in frugality and value can really compound over a lifetime. And they use Ken's family again when talking about allocating resources, specifically for cars and education.
They do. Transportation-wise, Ken and his wife bought new minivans practical for a family, but they kept them for a long time, typically 8 to 10 years each. Again, prioritizing utility and longevity over the newest model.
Consistent theme. And the education decision was a really big one, financially speaking.
Huge. Instead of private schools, they made a strategic choice. They prioritized buying a home in a neighborhood served by the absolute top-rated public schools in their state.
Investing in location to access high-quality public education.
Exactly. They recognized the quality was there, so they made it a key factor in their home purchase.
And the savings from avoiding private school tuition must have been substantial.
Enormous. The book estimates private school, K through 12, in their area could cost anywhere from $110,000 up to maybe $264,000 per child.
Per child, wow.
So for multiple kids, you're easily talking hundreds of thousands saved, likely well over $300,000 for their family, possibly much more.
That's a massive amount of money freed up for investing, for other goals.
Absolutely. And think about investing that saved tuition money year after year, decade after decade. The compounding effect is immense.
Yeah.
And interestingly, they found 72% of the millionaires they surveyed said they actively looked for neighborhoods with great public schools when buying a home. So Ken's strategy is pretty common among the wealthy next door.
It really highlights that focus on real value and long-term benefit over maybe perceived status.
Okay, so after these examples, the book kind of distills things down, right? It presents a summary of key elements for success.
Yes, they recap 8 key elements for economic success, principles originally laid out by Dr. Stanley in his earlier book, The Millionaire Mind. While the source we're using doesn't list all 8 explicitly right here, the book emphasizes these fundamentals are still just as crucial today for achieving financial independence.
Gotcha. Core principles that endure.
And they immediately follow that with another compelling real-world story. This one's about a 41-year-old guy who essentially retired early and moved to Oregon.
41. That's impressive. How'd he manage that?
He built up a really solid passive income stream, about $6,000 to $7,000 a month coming in from rental properties and dividend investments, plus more from IRA dividends.
Wow. So living off investments at 41. And his lifestyle must reflect those wealth-building principles, too. Oh, definitely. Very deliberate, maybe unconventional choices. He doesn't own a car now. The most expensive car he ever bought cost just $2,200.
$2,000.
Yep. Never owned a wristwatch. Never spent more than $200 on a pair of shoes.
These are clear examples of living way below your means, prioritizing independence over possessions.
Exactly. And the book suggests his personal history, his upbringing, likely shaped that strong work ethic and disciplined spending. It reinforces that idea our past experiences and the choices we make along the way have this powerful compounding effect.
Okay. Now, the book then takes aim at some common myths, right? Misconceptions about wealth and the wealthy. They use this example of a Russian immigrant couple, the Komplainskis.
Yes, the Komplinskis. Their story is a great illustration of the dangers of relying on superficial headlines and not digging deeper.
What was their mistake?
Well, they apparently based their whole expectation of getting rich quick in America on news reports about the total U.S. personal wealth, which is obviously a massive number, and the average household net worth.
Falling into the average trap again.
Exactly. They saw the high average, saw media stories about billionaires and high-paid execs, and just assumed they'd soon be rolling in it too.
But reality hit differently.
Very differently. They didn't grasp the huge gap between average and median net worth, or that median income wasn't anywhere near the millions they maybe imagined. Their experience really shows that becoming a millionaire on a typical income takes time, discipline, strategy. It doesn't just happen.
And their house purchase didn't help either, did it?
No, they bought with a small down payment right before a local market dip, assuming rapid appreciation. Instead, the value dropped. It highlights that relying on quick real estate gains without a solid foundation is risky. Net appreciation is often slower than people think.
So the Komplainskis' big error was thinking wealth just appears in America without the hard work, the discipline, the sacrifice.
That's the core message. For almost everyone, wealth building is an active process, not a passive outcome. And this leads right into debunking another huge myth.
Let me guess. The idea you can judge wealth by outward appearances, the fancy car or the expensive watch.
Bingo! That's a myth Dr. Stanley spent his career fighting. The book uses the example of Ranger X Rich, a pseudonym, obviously. Dr. Stanley met him around 2010.
Ranger X Rich. His story is quite revealing, isn't it?
Hmm.
Shows how holding on to these myths can really mess with your own head.
Totally. He used to have a job he loved, a natural resources ranger. But after the 2008 recession, budget cuts meant his job got eliminated. He got reassigned to patrolling parking lots, issuing tickets. Awful situation for him.
Understandably frustrating.
Very. But instead of blaming the recession or budget cuts, he directed all his anger at this vague group he called the rich. Never defined who they were, just felt they were somehow responsible for his problems and were living it up while he suffered.
So his dissatisfaction was fueled by this fuzzy, likely inaccurate idea of what the rich were doing.
Exactly. It's a tragic example of how these broad, often emotionally charged assumptions about wealth can breed resentment and stop people from focusing on their own path to financial independence.
Yeah, it becomes a distraction.
And the book even touches on how this kind of class envy gets leveraged politically. It mentions Italy's Checkpoint Carlo, where they did very public crackdowns on luxury car owners, supposedly to catch tax cheats.
And the book raises concerns about doing similar things here.
Yeah, it suggests that if wealthy people feel constantly targeted just for being successful, they might cut back on buying luxury goods, hurting those markets. And maybe more importantly, they might feel less incentive to generate high taxable incomes if they feel penalized or resented for it.
It's a complex issue. The potential unintended consequences of policies driven by maybe inaccurate perceptions of wealth. Now, let's shift to something more positive. The finding about most millionaires being self-made, that's still true.
Yes. This was a bombshell finding in the original book, and the new research confirms it. Roughly 80% of millionaires in America are self-made, first-generation rich.
80%. That number is still powerful, despite all the talk about inequality or needing connections.
The data keeps showing that hard work, discipline, entrepreneurship, they still pave the way for most millionaires. Dr. Stanley's own research over decades consistently found 86% were self-made, even decamillionaires. And they cite Forbes data showing the percentage of self-made folks among the wealthiest Americans jumped from 38% in 1982 to 70% in 2012.
That's a massive increase among the super rich, too. It suggests the path is still very much open.
It does. And they even touch on socioeconomic mobility here. They reference that big study by Chetty and Saez using tax data.
What did that find?
Basically, that the odds of a child moving up the economic ladder in the U.S. have stayed pretty much the same for the last 30 years. It pushes back against the narrative that mobility has drastically declined.
Interesting. So while challenges exist, the potential for upward movement through effort and smart choices is still a major part of the American story, according to this data. Shifting again. The book talks about honesty, getting along with people. How does that fit into wealth building?
Right, it's not just numbers. Despite that evil Mr. Scrooge stereotype.
Yeah, the miserly grump.
The research on personality shows that things like conscientiousness, integrity, being honest, they're actually really important for financial success. They use the example of Dr. Lawrence, a self-made millionaire optometrist. He built his successful practice by genuinely prioritizing his customers' needs.
Makes sense. Trust, reputation. Those build successful businesses long-term, which builds wealth. And the book also clarifies the motivations of these millionaires next door. It's not always about the bling, is it?
Not usually. They quote Steve Jobs, who basically said, obsessing over money is kind of silly, not the most valuable thing in life. For most millionaires next door, the main driver isn't living some crazy, lavish lifestyle. It's about achieving financial independence, security, freedom.
It comes back to wealth being about security for the future, not just spending today. That aligns with the core definition. They even mention an article countering simple calls to just tax the rich, right? Pointing out the actual characteristics of these millionaires.
Exactly. It challenged the idea that all wealthy people are just high-spending consumers. It highlighted the frugality, the hard work, the focus on long-term security that defines the typical millionaire next door, which leads to this really weird, fascinating anecdote about the anonymous family.
Oh yeah, this super private wealthy couple from small-town America.
Right. This couple gets referred to a private bank in New York City. Why? Because they were selling some businesses and wanted total privacy in their hometown. Didn't want neighbors knowing just how wealthy they'd become. Apparently, that's common for affluent folks in smaller communities.
Okay, wanting privacy makes sense. But they were part of a bigger anonymous group.
This is the wild part. Dr. Stanley, through his charity work and mailing lists, started noticing the names Mr. and Mrs. Anonymous popping up everywhere, on annual reports for foundations, universities, listed as major donors in all sorts of categories.
Why?
Yes. This quiet couple was part of this huge, under-the-radar network of wealthy people who value anonymity and give away significant money without any fanfare. They represent this large, invisible segment of the affluent.
That completely shatters the stereotype of the flashy millionaire seeking attention. It also says something about how you should approach wealthy people, maybe.
Definitely. The book suggests empathy is key. Instead of making assumptions, ask about their journey. How did they get where they are? Apparently, almost nobody ever asks the millionaire next door about their actual story, their struggles.
Which brings us back to the core message, doesn't it? If you strip away all these myths about wealth, what are you left with?
You're left with your own behaviors, your choices,
Yeah.
your lifestyle. Those are the real determinants. Income matters, yes, but it's not wealth. The critical factor is your savings rate.
And that savings rate is driven by
Your consumption habits, your saving habits, how much you spend versus how much you keep. It boils down to a simple, unavoidable mathematical truth.
spend less than you earn.
Spend less than you earn, consistently. Save and invest the difference. There's just no other sustainable way to build wealth.
Okay. The book also gets into teaching kids about money, right? Using the author's own family as examples.
Yes, some great stories about their two sons. Both showed really impressive financial sense early on. The older son, starting in 4th grade, had this little side business, made good money,
Wow, 4th grade.
and he saved almost all of it. Bought himself an iPod eventually, but kept saving, even bought CDs, certificates of deposit in grade school. By the time he went to college, he'd saved $15,000.
15 grand. That's amazing for a kid, more than most adults have saved.
Right, and apparently the younger son followed a similar path.
So what were the key lessons at home? How do they instill that?
Several things. Neither son had a car in high school, no credit cards in their name, big one. They had to buy their own electronics, often by selling the old ones first.
Teaching the cost of upgrading, depreciation.
Exactly. And taking care of stuff so it had resale value.
Yeah.
Practical, hands-on financial education.
It really shows the power of instilling those habits early.
Yeah.
But the book also shares a story about learning from negative examples, right?
Yeah, a personal story from someone whose parents struggle financially even though they worked hard. They realized later their dad was just bad with money, always spent more than he earned.
Ouch. And that impacted their own finances.
Profoundly. They said they basically make financial decisions now by thinking, what would dad do? And then doing the exact opposite.
Wow. Learning by counterexample.
They've regretted not learning about saving, investing, credit from their parents, but they used that frustration as fuel. They went from a negative $40,000 net worth in their early 30s
Negative 40,000.
to over $800,000 by their late 40s, just through discipline,
No.
maxing out retirement plans, keeping debt super low.
That's an incredible turnaround. Shows it's never too late.
Yeah.
And really underlines why teaching kids about money is so vital. Now, beyond just financial knowledge, the book talks about respecting money itself.
That's a key distinction. Financial literacy, knowing how money works, is important, sure. But the book argues that discipline in saving and spending often matters even more.
Self-control.
Self-control, that combination of knowledge and self-control, that's presented as the really powerful recipe for financial success.
And there's research backing this up, linking personality traits to financial outcomes.
Yes, they cite studies linking both financial literacy and the personality trait of conscientiousness to holding more assets. It supports the idea that interventions to improve self-control, even from childhood, can make a real difference financially. They also contrast growing up where money talk was taboo versus a home where it was open.
How does that play out?
They tell the story of Christy. Her parents, an army sergeant and a homemaker, had limited income but were super diligent about budgeting, frugal. And they involved the kids. The whole family would sit down, look at the paycheck, plan the month's spending together. Christy and her siblings learned budgeting, prioritizing needs versus wants, justifying purchases right from the start. She credits that upbringing for much of her later business success.
That sounds like incredibly valuable training. But the book adds a caution about extreme frugality, doesn't it? If it feels like deprivation.
Yes, that's an important balance. If frugality becomes so tight it feels like constant denial, like you're missing out on life, it can backfire, create resentment. The key is finding a sustainable balance, understanding why you're making the choices. The goal is independence, not unnecessary misery.
Right. Purposeful frugality, not just deprivation. They share another example, Mrs. H's mother, who built wealth through steady, prudent saving and spending.
Her story reinforces the main point. Financial independence requires disciplined behaviors, consistently applied, regardless of what society pushes or marketers scream at you. Focus on the goal independence and maybe see a more Spartan lifestyle as a temporary, effective tool to get there.
Being intentional, tuning out the noise. Now, another really interesting factor they explore is the role of a supportive spouse. That seems huge.
Absolutely huge. There's
Yeah.
this powerful anecdote from a guy who says meeting his wife literally changed his financial life. Her belief in him, even when he doubted himself, plus their shared goals, it was instrumental.
How so?
They made decisions together, like buying a house based only on his income because she wanted to stay home with the kids. Her support allowed him to take business risks that paid off massively long term.
Wow. Having that shared vision and support system.
Mm.
And it's not just emotional support, right? There's another example.
Yes, Owen. A senior sales exec getting nervous about his career around age 50. His wife, instead of worrying with him, invested $5,000 of her own money to hire a career placement consultant for him.
Proactive support. Did it work?
Paid off big time. It just shows the tangible impact a supportive partner, someone who believes in you and invests in you, can have.
These stories really drive home that wealth building is often a team effort. Having a partner on the same page is invaluable.
Okay, now the book makes this interesting distinction. Income statement affluent versus true wealth builders. What's that about?
They use Diane Warren, the incredibly successful songwriter, as an example. Her clients, famous singers, entertainers, often make huge incomes.
Right, top of their game.
But many fall into this income statement affluent category, meaning they're hyper consumers.
Yeah.
They need that constant flow of high income to fund extravagant lifestyles, maintain their image.
So their well-being is tied to the income statement, not the balance sheet where wealth lives.
Precisely. Their self-worth, their social standing, it's often tied to spending, comparing themselves to others doing the same. It becomes this relentless cycle, always needing to hunt and gather more income, more fans, just to keep up. It can lead to insecurity, unhappiness, despite the high earnings. High income doesn't equal wealth building. Crucial distinction. High income doesn't mean high net worth accumulation. And they even mention specific challenges for, like, doctors, high earners who still struggle with wealth building.
Yeah, they acknowledge doctors earn way more than average, obviously, but their own trend research shows many physicians actually fall into this category, high income, but challenges building substantial net worth.
Maybe due to massive student debt, late start on earning, lifestyle expectations.
Could be a combination of factors. It just reinforces that income alone isn't the whole story. Now, the book pivots to something fascinating. Consumer psychology and marketing. How that influences us.
Ah, Dr. Stanley's marketing background coming through, the shampoo example.
Exactly. He wrote this piece, The Consumer Science of Awesome Shampoo.
Huh.
It brilliantly shows how marketing ties our self-esteem to, well, shampoo.
It sounds absurd when you say it like that, but it works, doesn't it? Companies convince us we need their specific brand for happiness, status.
Totally. The book highlights the absurdity, but also the power of it. They mention Procter & Gamble spending $7.1 billion on advertising in 1 year. Billion.
$7 billion telling us we need their stuff.
The takeaway: we need to be super aware of the messages we're constantly bombarded with. Question the source. Think about how it's trying to influence our spending.
That constant reminder, nothing is really free.
Mm.
There's always a cost, even if it's just influencing your future choices. And this ties into the bigger point about happiness.
Unequivocally, the book states flat out, lasting happiness has very little to do with the brand names or price tags of your stuff. They looked at over 200 characteristics of high-income, high-net-worth people.
And
Any link between wealth level and happiness was weak. Correlation doesn't equal causation anyway. Chasing happiness through buying more stuff, it's likely futile and probably financially damaging.
so resist the marketing, focus on real value, and avoid comparing yourself to others. The book has a story about that too, right? The neighborhood comparison.
Yeah, Deb, who suggested a coworker buy a house in a more blue-collar area to afford a better house. The coworker was offended.
Ouch. Hit a nerve about neighborhood status.
Exactly. It highlights that keeping up with the Joneses pressure, judging based on superficial stuff like zip codes. The book even quotes Bruce Springsteen saying you find jerks in every neighborhood, rich or poor. Location doesn't guarantee happiness or good neighbors.
Focus on living purposefully, frugally, according to your own values. They give that really detailed example of the 59-year-old guy, right?
Oh yeah, that's a great picture of a rich life, not just financially. Bikes to work, 38-year marriage, successful kids, private college paid off, no debt, no mortgage, owns a business, debt-free, coaches sports, sings in the choir, gardens, makes cider, keeps bees, does volunteer home building trips, shares Christian values with his wife.
Wow, that's a life full of activity, purpose, connection, built on intentional choices, not excessive spending.
Precisely. A deeply satisfying life without needing flashy consumption. And sometimes wealthy people even use appearances strategically in a frugal way. The Lawyer and the Watch, Ned Davis. Successful trial lawyer, considered buying a fancy gold watch status symbol, right? But then he read Stop Acting Rich.
And changed his mind.
Totally. Found a cool vintage Timex for $40 at a thrift shop instead. Realized he didn't need the expensive watch to project success. Understated and frugal worked just fine.
Being intentional about spending, even on things tied to professional image. Now, the book also kind of laments the shift to disposable goods, right? And praises quality.
Yeah, they talk about Henkel Harris Furniture, this maker of amazing solid wood stuff temporarily closing. It reflects how marketing pushed us towards a disposable society. Furniture as fast fashion, trendy, cheap materials, easily replaced.
Instead of buying something quality that lasts generations.
Right. They highlight the value of finding previously owned, high-quality pieces like Henkel Harris, often cheaper in the long run and much better made.
Shift the mindset. Quality and longevity over cheap and trendy. Which links back to prioritizing needs over wants. Mrs. Point.
The couture clothes example.
Yes, Mrs. Point prioritizes living in the best neighborhood, that's her need, or high priority want, but for clothes. She buys previously owned couture, high fashion but secondhand.
Why?
Her logic. Fancy clothes depreciate fast. So buy used, save a ton, and invest those savings in appreciating assets. Stocks, real estate, it's super strategic. The book even wonders if she's implicitly critiquing the income statement affluent with that approach.
Smart allocation. Prioritize assets that grow, save on assets that shrink. Now, the book reminds us wealth building takes serious time and effort, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah. The typical millionaire in their study worked a median of 59,800 hours to reach that seven-figure net worth.
59,000 hours. That puts things in perspective. Way more time than prepping for the SATs or getting a degree. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Consistent hard work, dedication, perseverance over many, many years. And while intelligence gets talked about a lot, the book says other traits are more consistently linked to success. Absolutely. Intelligence helps, sure, but discipline, especially frugality, hard work, and perseverance. Those are the factors consistently supported by the research as key differentiators for economic success. It's a recurring theme.
And beyond just money discipline, they bring in conscientiousness again as a core personality trait.
Right. Financial literacy isn't enough. Conscientiousness, being organized, responsible, diligent, goal-oriented, that's crucial for success at work and with money. They share Mrs. Lang's saying, everything in business gets recorded and judged. It links to integrity, honest practices.
And that reputation matters, even in tough times.
Definitely. They use the example of Mr. M, a home builder. Even when the Atlanta real estate market crashed in 2011, he thrived. Why? Because he had this rock-solid reputation for quality and integrity. People trusted him.
So it's character, not just calculations. Now, the book offers some surprising paths to success, right? Challenging the idea that you need an elite education.
This really flies in the face of conventional wisdom sometimes. They tell the story of Dave. Low C average in college, went to a lower-ranked school, modest SATs.
Doesn't sound like the typical path to riches.
Not at all. But he founded and runs a very successful investment management company. Gets tons of applications from grads of top-tier schools now.
Wow, and the general survey data backs this up. What were the stats for typical millionaires?
Average SAT score, around 1190. Most common college grade, B average college GPA, 2.9.
So solid, but not necessarily super elite academic performance across the board.
Exactly. And very few decamillionaires ranked attending a top college as very important to their success. It was way down the list of factors.
So drive, practical skills, money management often outweigh the fancy degree. The quote about the degree getting you the first job.
But after 3 years, nobody will care where you went to school. Yeah, that sums it up well. It's about what you do after school. Now, overcoming obstacles, self-concept. That's also key.
Ralph de la Vega's story. The AT&T guy.
Incredible story. Immigrated from Cuba, struggled with English, discouraged from engineering, but became CEO of AT&T Mobility. Resilience, self-belief. And they cite research showing kids from advantaged backgrounds with high self-concept earned way more than equally advantaged kids with low self-concept.
So resources aren't enough. You need to believe in yourself.
That internal belief, that resilience, it's critical. which leads back to the enduring importance of core values.
They share an experience from a near-Dick-a-millionaire, finding his life reflected in the principles.
Yeah, he read The Millionaire Mind and saw himself. Living below means taking calculated risks, dealing with frustrations, supportive spouse, religious beliefs, self-belief, finding a business niche. It all resonated. And the book reiterates integrity and discipline consistently ranked as top success factors by the wealthy in both 1998 and 2016.
These values are timeless foundations. And the book touches on dealing with criticism, too, which often comes with success.
Briefly, yeah. Suggests someone named Roy reread the section on critics in The Millionaire Mind. Shares quotes about critics being like a necessary filter, strengthening resolve, life's a marathon, don't let labels define you.
Yeah.
And the more successful you get, the more critics you'll likely attract.
Good reminder. Stay focused. Don't let negativity derail you. Okay, let's talk about time. How do millionaires use their most valuable resource?
This is really interesting. Big difference between pause, prodigious accumulators, and UAWs, underaccumulators. Pause spends significantly more time reading business articles, reading in general, continuous learning.
Okay, and UAWs?
The book suggests UAWs might spend more time working just to support their higher consumption levels, less time left over for financial planning, learning.
Makes sense. And social media use differed too.
Yeah, in the newer study, UAWs reported spending more time on social media, like 14 hours a week versus 9 for pause. Raises the question, could that time be used more productively for financial goals?
It's about those trade-offs, isn't it? How we allocate our limited time. Now, career satisfaction comes up briefly too.
They mention a young woman finding accounting less draining than a job she wasn't suited for, even if accounting wasn't her passion. Finding a good fit matters. And they note millionaires are generally a satisfied group, 90% very satisfied with life, which often links to job satisfaction. They include some general U.S. job satisfaction stats, too.
So finding work you're reasonably content with probably helps overall well-being, which can't hurt financially. And then, surprisingly, sales experience comes up.
Yeah, from Dr. Stanley's early work helping banks target the wealthy. He studied top salespeople, and they found sales marketing professional was the #1 first full-time job reported by nearly 1,000 millionaires surveyed.
Wow. Does that mean sales is the best path to wealth?
Not necessarily. The book clarifies. It doesn't mean salespeople have a higher probability of becoming wealthy. But the skills learned in sales resilience, communication, persuasion, understanding needs, those are incredibly valuable and transferable, especially for entrepreneurs.
Foundational skills for many paths. Okay, and turning setbacks into springboards. The laid-off blackjack dealer.
Great story. Minnesota Millionaire Next Door got laid off from a part-time blackjack dealer job in college. Tough at the time.
Sure.
But it taught him a crucial lesson. Don't depend solely on an employer. That layoff motivated him to go into self-employment, which led to his early retirement.
Using challenges as fuel. Focusing on planning, not blaming. That seems key. And the book touches on strategies for career changes, achieving freedom.
Acknowledges that feeling of being trapped in a job you hate, wanting to be self-employed. Introduces the idea of needing margin financial cushion and time flexibility to make big changes. Uses Mr. Barry Lionel, a former sales exec, to illustrate how your vocation impacts lifestyle and flexibility.
You need that breathing room to pivot. And finding unique, profitable work you love is emphasized again with those female entrepreneurs.
Linda Resnick, Teleflora, Jerry Redding, Redken, Paula Kent Meehan, Redken marketing genius, all identified unique opportunities, were passionate, worked incredibly hard, requotes The Millionaire Mind, select a vocation that is not only unique and profitable, but one you love.
That combination, unique need, passion, hard work, seems potent. And the email from Mrs. F, inspired by Millionaire Women Next Door.
Yeah, just showing how these principles can motivate people even when things are tough, which leads to more examples of identifying opportunities and leveraging skills.
Tanya Lanthier, the dental hygienist.
Saw a need for temporary dental staffing. Built a multi-million-dollar business connecting offices with hygienists, leveraged her industry knowledge.
And Kay, the surgical nurse.
Transitioned to selling surgical equipment using her medical background, then became a successful medical headhunter using her contacts and industry insight. Again, prior knowledge or experience in the field is almost always there for successful entrepreneurs.
Seeing the need, leveraging your skills, taking the initiative, and despite technology changing things, the book says the fundamentals of business success remain.
Focus, creativity, hard work, discipline. Still crucial. They use that fighter pilot analogy. They see, but they do not see. You need the right focus to spot real opportunities. Successful entrepreneurs are often contrarians, think differently, find niches with less competition.
Thinking outside the box, finding underserved markets. Okay, let's talk investing. Enduring principles here too.
Absolutely. Attitudes might shift, market conditions change, but a disciplined approach is always vital. Prudent behavior, whether innate or learned, has a huge impact on long-term wealth.
And they debunk another myth here. Millionaires and art collections.
Right. Marketing pushes this idea, but it's mostly myth. High-income folks might buy art for status, but their net worth might not be impressive. Most millionaires next door aren't focused on large art portfolios.
Focus on assets that actually build wealth. And good investing comes back to discipline again.
Big time. At least 60% of millionaires have clear financial goals, avoid distractions, spend time planning, and crucially, most believe their investment success comes from their own efforts, studying, learning. They don't just blindly rely on advisors.
Taking ownership.
And investors with better habits. They're more likely to fire underperforming advisors. They're engaged.
They also warn against action bias in investing, jumping on every bit of news.
Yeah, research shows investors who constantly react and trade tend to do worse. Millionaires make transactions, sure, but the key is whether they're prudent, well-thought-out decisions based on a long-term strategy, not emotional reactions to market noise. Sound decisions require knowledge, a future focus, and staying calm.
Keep your cool, stick to the plan. Now, the role of financial advisor seems to be evolving. The book contrasts different types.
Yes, Mr. Jack, maybe transaction-focused versus Mrs. Jenkins, fee-only fiduciary focused on the client's long-term success. The book argues the real value advisors offer now is less about portfolio tweaking and more about helping clients change behaviors, moving them from UAW to PAW status.
So behavioral coaching is becoming more important than just stock picking.
That seems to be the argument. Advisors like Ms. Jenkins prioritize transparency, fiduciary duty, educating clients to be savvy investors. That attracts the millionaire next door type. And advisors are spending more time on non-financial stuff too.
Like what?
Life goals, health, career issues, family problems. It suggests behavioral management and coaching might be how human advisors stay relevant against robo-advisors.
A shift towards a more holistic, relationship-based approach. So how do you choose the right advisor?
They mention the slow adoption of the fiduciary standard, stress-picking trusted advisors who put your interests first, provide questions to ask. List those top non-financial topics again, emphasizing the move towards holistic practice.
Find someone who gets the big picture, your goals, your behavior, not just the numbers. Okay, as we wrap up this deep dive, the book has a final, powerful reminder, doesn't it, about the long game.
Absolutely. It stresses that quick tips and anecdotes aren't enough. Building real lasting wealth requires consistent, effective behavioral patterns, sustained frugality, wise financial habits. It's about the consistency over years, not just occasional good decisions.
It's a journey built on consistent, disciplined, maybe unglamorous choices.
That sums it up perfectly.
Okay, let's try to synthesize all of this. What are the absolute core takeaways from this incredible deep dive into the next millionaire next door? Well, first, wealth isn't just income. It's built through consistent, disciplined habits over time. Living below your means, non-negotiable, it's math.
Right. And strategic choices matter how you use resources, whether you pursue entrepreneurship. And the data consistently shows most millionaires are self-made. Hard work, discipline, perseverance, those are the real drivers, not just luck or inheritance.
And crucially, we need to discount those pervasive myths. Don't judge by appearances. Resist conspicuous consumption. Avoid the comparison trap. Your potential for building wealth. It really rests on your behaviors, your choices, your mindset. Income is just one piece. What you do with it is the deciding factor.
Well said. It really comes down to taking control of what you can control.
Exactly. So on that note, here's something for you, our listener, to chew on. After hearing all this, what's one specific financial habit or maybe one ingrained belief about wealth that you need to reevaluate in your own life? Think about how even small, consistent changes guided by these enduring principles could compound over time and make a real difference in your own journey towards financial independence.
Thank you for joining us at Wisdom House, where we bring you timeless insights from the greatest books. If you found this deep dive valuable, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Wisdom House. Stay curious, stay inspired, and we'll see you in the next video.